So Sne, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on the platform.
Thank you. But before we walk into the future, Sne, can you tell us a little bit about your own background?
Where
did you grow up?
So I was born in a very rural community called Emutu in KwaZulu-Natal. And then I think when I was 5 or 6, my family moved. We moved to a bigger town called Newcastle, still in KZN. So I did primary and high school in Newcastle. And then when I completed my grade 12, I then went over to Johannesburg, and that's where I started this idea, this vision of becoming a chartered accountant. And it's literally spiraled to where I am now. But essentially at my core, I'm a small town girl, which is really big dreams.
And talking about dreams, Sne, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So when I was younger, I always think back to Mrs. Subramani's class, and I think this was in grade 6, and she asked us to put together a vision board of some sort. And she said, put down all the things that you still want to achieve. And this is grade 6, Snare, right? And she said to me, put down a vision of all the things that you still want to achieve in the future. And I remember I had the wildest dreams on that sheet. I wanted to travel the world. Small town girl, I'd never been outside of Newcastle, but at that point I really wanted to see the rest of the world. So I remember putting down a map of the world. I remember putting down that I wanted a town to be named after me. So those are the 2 that I can remember so clearly. Just ideas around being able to travel have always been such a strong idea for me. And over the years, obviously, it's progressed, this idea of how I wanted to define my future and who I wanted to be in the future. But I know that idea of wanting to travel has always been at the center of it all.
And can you tell us who inspired you in your early days?
I think in my early days, it was definitely the women around me, my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, just how I saw them navigate very challenging situations and navigate raising our family. That was my first point of reference of what a powerful Black woman looked like. So I always connected to that. And that's how I think when I looked at them, I've always wanted to be a replica or half the woman that I saw them be as they were raising me.
Now, Sne, today you are an assistant manager at EY Capital Markets, and you are also the founder of the Great African Read, and a finalist of Joy of Reading in Denmark. Can you tell us about what inspired your passion for reading?
So again, I think I have to take it back to one of my high school teachers who was so strong about us having to read. Mrs. Pagati was so big on us having to read, and she'd force us to read 12 books every single year. And I think once that started, and you start falling in love with literature. But how I then got into running and starting up the Great African Read is completely different from how I got into reading. So something that was forced down initially that I ended up falling in love with, that's not how it actually was for me when I started the Great African Read. So when I was in varsity, and this is just the backdrop and the backstory behind the Great African Read. So when I was still in university, the Nedbank, the actual bank in South Africa, they were running a program where they would basically invite CA students to pitch ideas in terms of how they can move their communities forward, right? So you had to come up with a social initiative that would engage your community and basically enable people to progress within that community. So I decided to come up with a spelling bee. And at the time, it was just really about winning a prize that Nedbank was giving. I think at the time it was an iPad, and I just wanted to win an iPad. Yeah. But as I got into why, because then I think they had specifically said, tell us why you would want a spelling bee. What problem are you actually trying to change and impact and move forward, right? And I sat down with myself and said, okay, what does a spelling bee actually do? Sure, I want to win the iPad, but how do I sell this idea? And as I sat down, I thought about how a spelling bee, for you to be able to spell, you need to actually start reading, right? So I was like, wait, reading, literacy, isn't that an issue? And as I did more research with my hopes of winning this iPad, I started finding out that literacy was such a big issue for communities across South Africa, for communities that I was raised in, for communities that my friends were raised in. It was a global issue that impacted so many other people. So before you even get to the employment issue that we currently have in South Africa, people just don't even have the skill of reading. So they can't even go to school. Because of that, they can't even progress forward, right? So in that moment, in those moments, when I was trying to do this research, I realized that literacy was such an issue globally, locally, in my community as well. So I started what was then the Newcastle Spelling Bee, right? And it was just targeted at helping the people in my community, just initiating that initial idea and saying, you need to start reading, right? So after we hosted our first spelling bee in Newcastle, I was so moved by the turnout and the number of people that came on and the schools that were involved. And I said, I can't believe you can take an actual idea. This is me in varsity. And I sat with myself and I said, I actually took an idea and it's now manifested, and I was able to execute it and really impact change within my small community. How much more can I actually do with this idea? And then over the years, this idea then evolved. And that's when I started the Great African Read, which has now grown legs and is now this formidable brand that I'm so very proud of. So how the Great African Read essentially works is we have a literacy cycle where we encourage grade 10 learners that are in high school to write short stories that we then take and we compile, adapt, and put into our book series, our children's book series. We then take that book, we share it with the market, and then we raise funds. And we take the copies of some of the donated books and we adopt a school, and we basically, once we've adopted the school, we create a reading facility for them. And then we share these books with them. So not only have we been able to publish stories from young people across South Africa who would never even have the opportunity to have these stories published, we've really been able to create these reading spaces that allow a community, rural communities, to really invest in the young people of that community. So it's just been an evolution of this idea that has grown legs, essentially.
Great. And Sine, tell us, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I think over the years, so I didn't necessarily, because I'm still in the very early stages of my actual career, what I studied before I took this detour of starting this literacy initiative. But what I've seen as I've started engaging young people, to collaborate with me in the work that I do, collaborating young people and bring them into the space where they can publish their own stories. I think the future of leadership is really, really in the hands of the young people. I think I'll speak from a South African perspective. And I think it's just a matter of, there's so much talent in the world. There's so much talent and very powerful young people with such brilliant minds. So the leadership in South Africa really, I think it should be invested around investing in the young minds that make up our beautiful country. Yeah, I think so our stories are based on various themes, right? So this year we had themes across climate change and my vision for Africa. And the stories that we got, Dr. Nick, were truly, truly inspiring. And to be able to see that documented by someone who's in grade 10, probably 15 or 16 years old, it just goes to show that we have such brilliant minds in our country, but it's going to take so much nurturing and investment and opportunity to really see that through and manifest into something that could really, really impact positive change in the future.
And Sine, from your experience, what does it take? What does it we have to do to nurture, invest in future talent and to enable them?
Yeah, I think what we're doing right now as the Great African Read is very powerful. Being able to bring in these young learners and say, share your thoughts. Let's hear what your thoughts are. Let's put them on paper. Let's publish these books. Let's share what your thought process looks like with the world, essentially.
Right.
Let's share your creativity with the world, right? So you bring them into the space that they're not familiar with, where you're exposing them to a whirlwind of ideas, right? And then we actually go back to these communities, and then we plow back and we give back and we say, we know you don't have enough, but we are going to give you the resourcing to really step forward. So I think it's nurturing and providing people with access, exposure, and resources that changes someone's entire life, right? So once you start seeing it, once you can start visualizing it through reading a book or just having exposure through different conversations with people that are in that space already, that changes your entire mindset and how the things you wish for, the things that you dream for, and the things that you work towards. So I think just being very intentional about who you engage and how you nurture that conversation, and also how you then assist people with the little that you might have, but it really, really goes a long way to change their lives. So you leave a book, but someone reads that and it completely changes their mindset forever.
Now, Sine, today social media obviously plays a big role in our lives. Do you also help your leaders, your readers, your students to communicate maybe on social media? What is your advice about social media?
We use social media as a sharing platform, right? So obviously I'm on LinkedIn, and it's a separate identity because it's Sine the professional. But we also have platforms across Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram for the Great African Read. And we use it as a sharing platform because our initiatives are centered around impacting change that's very widespread, right? So we need to make sure that we are able to reach people far and wide. So we use it as a tool to engage people that we can't, my team is based in Newcastle. They can't necessarily walk up to people in Cape Town, for instance.
Right.
So what we do is we engage with social media and we say, how do we reach people that we wouldn't necessarily be able to engage if we didn't have the powerful tool that is social media.
And Sne, these are challenging times. So what is your advice for future leaders? How should they go about, what kind of challenges should they expect to encounter in their career? And how should they go about overcoming these challenges?
Dr. Nick, I remember when I started the Great African Read, and it wasn't the easiest project to start up. And as I was thinking about this question, I just remembered that one, you need to start with what you have and where you are. So you can't wait for the perfect situation, for the perfect climate, for the perfect opportunity for you to actually materialize or push your ideas forward. So with the little resources that you have, start with that. With the little network that you have, start with that. With only 5 people liking your post, start with that, right? So start with where you are and move your ideas forward. That's the first thing. The second thing is you need to be able to really be persistent with your dream. Not everybody's going to believe in what you are trying to achieve. Not everybody is going to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. But once you are persistent with your goal, because you have a clear vision as to what it is you want to achieve, they'll make sense of it as it starts materializing, right? So we've been able to now publish 2 books since we started the Great African Read, and we are in the process of finalizing publishing our 3rd and 4th title. And there was a point where people didn't even understand why I wanted to publish a book. Like, why would I want to adapt this book? Why would I want to, how was I going to create these reading rooms in these rural communities? Did I even have the budgets, right? Did I have the team? But it's really you being persistent with yourself and being very clear about the dreams that you still want to achieve.
And Sne, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
I think one, and we've spoken about this before, we live in a world where social media is a very powerful tool. So as a future leader, you need to be able to navigate. There are definitely a lot of challenges that come with being on social media, right? But you really need to be able to teach yourself how to navigate that tool, because it can lead to so many conversations. It can lead to so many ideas being materialized. So I think just for future leaders, it's good and well that you have a vision. It's good and well that you have clarity of thought in terms of what it is you want to do. But start engaging with people that are already in that space. Start learning and studying people that are doing really well in that space, and just using and navigating social media to really push those boundaries.
And Sine, you are inspiring, you have been inspiring so many young leaders. Can you maybe share a story where you mentored formally or informally an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
I've had very organic interactions with I don't necessarily think they are mentees, but it's just people that have reached out and said, hey, Sine, I really, really enjoy what you do, and I'm really inspired by your story. Can we have that catch up, right? I'm also on a particular platform where my mentor, Yolanda Tuba, started this platform called the Mentorship Boardroom, where there are various mentors across the world that are registered on the platform, and young people across the world can just reach out and seek mentorship through this platform. So I've also engaged with people on that platform that would come back and say, you know what, Sine, got a new job, things are looking up for me. Or sometimes they'll come back and say, Sine, this is still so tough. Can you just help me how you navigate very challenging situations? Like, how do you navigate feelings around giving up, right? So it's just always those conversations. There was a point where I had an informal mentee reach out to me and say, I actually am at my wit's end and I don't know how to continue with my path of wanting to be a CA when it feels just so challenging. And then you have a conversation and you share your story with people, and turns out a year later, this very same person graduated, right? So it's been very organic. It's just people reaching out on social media, or people reaching out and just calling and saying, hey, what advice do you have? And I think when I look back at my own journey, the most constructive conversations around mentorship or just people who've guided me are those really informal ones where I saw someone on social media that I really connected with, and I said, hey, can you tell me how you did it? Or I'm struggling to navigate this particular area of my life. Can you share your thoughts? Or just having conversations and engaging. I found that to be very, very, very powerful, because those little conversations become big decisions that you then have to make in the future.
And tell us, Sine, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
So my outlook might be very, very different. And it's also very subjective, but I believe that you can learn from anyone. I'm very fortunate to be in a space where I'm surrounded by leaders constantly. I work for a big 4 firm. I study our global lead. I'll study the partners within the group. I'll study the senior managers that I work with. I study my mentors. I read a lot. I engage different people. I study people that I work with in the literacy space. I'm constantly trying to seek knowledge and see how people are able to effectively lead in their different roles. So it's not necessarily drilled down into one particular person, but I think because I study so many different people and how they react to situations, I'm able to pull from so many different sources, and it's not necessarily one person. A senior manager on a job can teach me how to lead with integrity, right? But the global lead of our group can teach me how to encourage diversity within our space, right? So I'm constantly pulling from different sources and different people and learning constantly.
And Sine, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I'm on all social media platforms. And it's Sine Shabangu on LinkedIn, so easy to find. And then Sine_Shabangu on Twitter. Yeah, but very, very easy to find. And they can follow The Great African Read as The Great African Read on all social media platforms.
Thank you. And last but not least, Sine, what is your advice for the millions of learners who are now looking to leave school, who are starting to or looking to start their career, enter the world of work? What is maybe 1 or 2 success factors they should keep in mind?
So I think back at a young Sine in varsity who was about to finish her honors and what I would tell her going into the working space. I'd say be teachable. Be ready to, I know sometimes you think you know the most in the room, like you, you think you're the smartest, the sharpest pencil. Right. But really when you walk into that first meeting, that first interaction with the people that you work with, and this is advice that I've carried with me over the years, is be teachable, be a sponge and really be able to learn, because sometimes we are so dead set on our ideas that we are not ready to really take in what other people, the wisdom that can be shared by other people. So when you walk into that space, just be ready to absorb and learn and be teachable, because people enjoy being around teachable spirits, you know? So you really need to get yourself in a position where you are, yes, you want to add value. Yes, you want to share your experiences and your knowledge, but don't think you are always the smartest person in the room. Be teachable.
Well, Sine, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and leading the way and putting your passion out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. We're publishing our 3rd and 4th title in the coming months. So it's been a very, very busy time for me and my team.
Okay, great. Keep up the good work. And
thank you so much, Dr. Nick. Thank you for inviting me.